Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of FireDEV, a fireside chat with people in the industry. Today, my guest is Sola Chang. Sola, how are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. So, just for the audience, listening out there, this is going to be a quick podcast. It's going to be about 30 minutes. So I'm just going to, dive straight in. Sola, you work for Blizzard. Can you speak in what capacity, what products you work on?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am a UI UX designer for the Hearthstone team, and I specifically work on the construction mode of Hearthstone. So I basically help with the UI UX design behind new card mechanics, cards, any features within the game, new game modes. Like we just came out with not too long ago the Twist game modes. So I worked on that. So a lot of different card related mechanics I work on.
Okay, and a game like that, how many people would you typically have on that game working at any given time?
It depends because sometimes if we're just working within our main group, it can range from like 15 to 20-ish people. But if we're collaborating with other teams on Hearthstone, that can kind of grow a little bit more. So it really depends on what kind of feature we're working on and how many people are involved. But yeah.
Okay, you mentioned other teams. Do you mean other teams that are working on other projects and they've been brought in? Maybe there's a big update or something like that. Like, can you just expand on those other teams?
Sure, sure. So internally, we have something called pods.
Mhm.
They're basically smaller groups that are aimed to focus on one area within Hearthstone specifically. So I'm not talking about
Okay.
other Blizzard games. So I'm on what we call the Hearthstone pod. There's one for the shop. There's one for battlegrounds. So sometimes if we overlap on work between multiple pods, then we kind of collaborate together.
Okay, makes sense. And is that very typical with Blizzard to have these teams, these pods, basically granulate each project, per se, or is that more Hearthstone specific?
Yeah, I can't really say much about other teams as I haven't worked on other teams before. Um, but I know that when I first joined Blizzard, they were transitioning to this sort of pod structure. So it wasn't always like this, is what I can say.
Okay. And these pods, like how many people would you typically have in there? And is there like a specific type of roles that you definitely get in every pod, or does it depend on what they're working on?
Yeah, it depends on what they're working on, but definitely each pod should have engineers because you need people to program the things that they're working on. Not every single pod has a UI UX designer, and sometimes our artists are shared between pods. We have ones that are dedicated to specifically Hearthstone, but some other, for example, a pod that focuses on the events in the game don't have dedicated artists. Sometimes we have to quote unquote borrow artists from other pods to get work done.
So do you ever, have the opportunity to like jump between different pods within our Hearthstone? Or is it more like this is the pod you're on until that, like let's say the job's done per se, that's it.
Sure. Yeah, I would say we do have an opportunity to collaborate with other pods. So I sometimes help out with other pods when there's a lot of overlap. And sometimes other members from other pods will help us. Um, but it's not, I think a majority of my work goes through Hearthstone.
Okay, fair enough. And with games today, one of the key things and something that's becoming very important is accessibility. Something if you look at games 20 years ago, I mean, the games didn't really even have tutorials, at the start of the game. It
Mhm.
was like, here you are, you're in the first level, you figure it out yourself, it's trial by fire. But now there's a lot of accessibility options. What are some of the accessibility options within Hearthstone, and are there any specifics that are either unique or pioneered by Hearthstone compared to other Blizzard products?
Yeah, so I haven't been on the Hearthstone team since its inception, so I can't speak to the history of how we've adopted accessibility into our product, but I can say it's an entire effort by the entire team. We make efforts to educate ourselves on standards and best practices in the industry. It's constantly on our mind, especially the UI UX team. We do things like considering text display, contrast, visual and audio cues. We have standards that we want to uphold as we design new designs. And we use tools like color contrast analyzers to make sure that things are working properly. But yeah, I can say that we definitely make an effort.
Mhm. Fair enough. So, a game like Hearthstone, very popular game, but it's not as big as something like Diablo, for example. So, how quick do updates get released? Obviously, I know it's a big company still within Blizzard, and now obviously Activision Blizzard, and obviously that's within Xbox and Microsoft. But the size of the game, like how quickly do you, get features in, like sprints or however you work, and get them pushed out, especially on mobile where you can push them out pretty quickly.
Sure, sure. So for Hearthstone, we have three expansions that are released each year.
Hmm.
So those are kind of spread throughout the year, but we also have monthly updates, and sometimes we do hot fixes if it's very urgent. So generally, and I think our newest game mode Twist does a good job of showing and cycling through content. So we have, um, updates going out once every month or so. So yeah, we have a lot of content.
Okay, so a game like Hearthstone, very community driven. Is there community involvement? What sort of input does the community have to influence the game to make it better?
Sure. So I know a lot of our devs do go through forums like Reddit and X, or as formerly known as Twitter. We go through forums, right? Like we make a conscious effort to read what the community thinks, and we get a lot of insights from other devs who are like, "Oh, did you see this comment by so and so?" And we kind of talk about that and really care about what the community thinks about our features and releases.
Okay. And when you join the Blizzard, like, are you allowed to choose, what type of, what project you're going to work on, Hearthstone or Diablo or something else, or the pod, or is it a matter of where they need your particular set of skills at that time?
Sure. So I think when you first apply to Blizzard, you do have to choose which team you want to work on or which game you would like to work on. So I specifically applied to Hearthstone. That doesn't mean that I would work on, for example, Diablo. But within the Hearthstone team, they kind of talk about what you'd like to work on, what areas of the game interest you, and then we try to match it up and align you to whichever pod that has that need and like best fits your desires.
Okay, that's nice. So obviously, it depends on where the companies are, what products are what they're working on, what's important, for example. But that's nice to have that input from potential employees that are coming to work there. What would you like to work on, so why Hearthstone? Why not something like Diablo? So I'm guessing you're a Hearthstone player then.
Sure. Yes. Yes. I think there is a very fun vibe to our team. I really, I think the biggest highlight of working on Hearthstone for me is just the people who are on the team. Everyone is so, um, just not only are they intelligent and hardworking, but they're also humble and genuine. They really look out for each other. Like there have been multiple times when people are like saying, if you're sick, stay at home, your mental health is a priority, and everyone is just so thoughtful of each other. And we have a lot of initiatives and people who care about your success. I've never really felt like held back by anyone or anything, and it's just been overall a team effort that has highlighted my experience here.
No, I mean that's good to hear because you get a lot of companies. Obviously, some of it's probably exaggerated. Some of there's probably some truth to it. Where you hear about crunch time and
Mm.
people not getting paid. Especially within the gaming industry, it seems to be. And so it's good to hear when you've got a big company. Part of much bigger companies as well. With very successful products that aren't working their employees to the bone and realizing that you know there's more to a team than just the output. It's, it's the people that are putting in that input as well. So, it's good to hear that, Blizzard has that in mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I
So,
definitely echo that.
why did you go into UI and UX, as a designer? Again, I'm guessing you was a gamer, previously, and I would love you to share your experience and history with gaming in general. But why UI and UX?
Yeah, sure. That's a good question. So I first started off as a freelance artist and for games, and then I made uh, with the help of a team several indie games for game jams actually, and I kind of wore many hats there as an artist, as a UI/UX designer, a little bit of scripting, right, a little bit of animation. So kind of having exposure to all those different fields, I definitely felt very drawn by UX design because getting comments from players saying like, "Wow, this experience was great," or like, "That was really good UI," or like, "This felt really good." This like I didn't even think about the UI when I played this or when I interacted with this control or mechanic. Like that really kind of set my vision for what I wanted to contribute to a game. So yeah, just building good player experiences is something that I'm passionate about.
Okay. And you mentioned game jams. What sort of skills have you learned from game jams, and what's your opinions on recommending them to people? And how would you recommend people go about getting into game jams, and any specific ones?
Yeah, sure. So for your first question, it was about what I've learned from game jams. I think honestly, like organization is a huge one, especially when you're like on a smaller team. Like knowing what you will contribute to the game is huge. Also, sort of like wearing that producer hat to make sure timelines are met, deliverables are delivered, kind of making sure expectations are aligned with everyone, and just knowing how to adjust because you will probably overscope when you are in a game jam and you need to be able to think on your feet, adapt to what is actually feasible. So there's just a lot of really good soft skills that you develop from doing a game jam. In terms of game jams, I would recommend looking into. I highly recommend the bigger ones. We have like the Global Game Jam that happens usually at the beginning of the year. There's ones held by really big communities like Bracky's Game Jam. There's the Game Makers Toolkits Game Jam. So if you just go to itch.io/jams, that will have a list of a lot of great game jams you can explore.
So with projects in general, but something like a game jam, a code jam, where the whole project maybe just 2-3 days. It's not very long. It can be long hours, so people are getting tired. How do you it's not just other people's, it's yourself as well. Like ego can get in the way of it. I got this idea, or somebody else has this idea, and they're trying to push for it, immensely, but it might not be the best thing. And like I said, you might only have 12 hours left, 6 hours left. How do you handle ego? And obviously, in as a broader question, how do you handle that within a general team at a company like Blizzard?
Sure. I so would you like that within the context of game jams or within the context of working in like a gaming studio?
So both. So if you start a game jam first and then gaming studio, I feel like there'll probably be overlap. Obviously within a studio, so it's not as important if something doesn't go right for one day compared to a game jam where one day might be 50% of the whole development time. um,
Sure. Yeah, oh sorry. Yeah, so for game jams, I think it really requires you to utilize your communication skills. I think finding teammates who are a little bit more open-minded, are good communicators, I think is key to kind of avoiding that situation. I think I've been lucky enough where a lot of my teams and my teammates haven't had issues with being open-minded and discussing design decisions. They've all been fairly flexible with their thinking, and usually when we have play tests, we ask for user feedback, and we use that to justify some of our pivots in direction of the game, or rescoping and such. And usually it's like a team uh, discussion. It's not like one person gets all say. And so we try our best to listen and share our viewpoints and try to have that synonymous feeling, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So, how about within a bigger game studio?
Sure. I think that really comes down to, um, I think it's honestly the same thing with like communication and collaboration. I think uh, I've been in meetings where sometimes people have strong opinions, and we will have, people in place like a uh, product manager or a project manager who will have final say, but they will consider everyone's opinion. So ultimately, my job as a UI UX designer is conveying my beliefs behind and justification behind a design decision, whereas maybe someone on the game design side might say like this will affect gameplay this way, so the product manager would have to make that final say considering all the different factors. So I haven't really personally have had too much trouble in that area because we have a good structure in place to navigate through situations like that. But yeah.
So, what was your journey like? Getting into Blizzard. And, what can you share? In terms of the interview process, for example, and tips and tricks for others. There'll be a lot of people listening that will think, I would love to work for Blizzard. I would love to work for company, a studio like Blizzard. So what's it like? During that process before you even get there.
Sure, yeah. So before I even applied to Blizzard, I spent about half a year just joining a bunch of game jams. So I ended up making 5 game jam projects in half a year. And my goal with each one is teaching myself something new. So whether that was a new engine, a new tool, a new skill, right? Like I learned animation through one of the game jam projects. I practiced my art skills. I was learning more about UX design. So really that half year I was trying to explore so many different disciplines and fields. And then after that, I spent a good month just building out a portfolio based on the games that I had made. And I got a lot of feedback. I joined this community called Work with Indies. They're a Discord community. And they were so instrumental in helping me build out a portfolio that looked nice and clean. And then I actually ended up posting onto LinkedIn, showcasing my portfolio pieces. And that's actually when a recruiter reached out to me for a Blizzard position. Before that, I actually wasn't considering Blizzard because I didn't think I was qualified at the time. But after that, I, had more confidence. I polished my portfolio even more with more examples. I prepared for the interviews, and preparing for interviews, I just researched a lot about Blizzard. I used resources like Glassdoor, comparably to see what kind of interview questions were asked, what kind of UI UX design questions are typical in interviews. Created a bank and like prepared answers. I know the STAR method is usually recommended when preparing responses. I like to add on to that where I have reflection on each of those questions or experiences. And then I kind of went through the interview. I had multiple interviews and a take home design test. So, yeah, does that give a good picture?
Oh yeah, 100%. So, prior to even that, and even before the game jams, what's your academic background? Did you go to university? How much do you think that helped you with getting your position at Blizzard?
Sure. So I have a very untraditional background into gaming. I graduated with a degree in English literature, and I kind of went into different fields at first. I did like a little bit of freelance artwork. I worked at a law firm. I worked at a print shop. Then I went to Korea to teach computer science because I went back to school for computer science, right? So I kind of I've pivoted multiple times before I, you know, went into gaming. And honestly, all of those different experiences has kind of given me a very wide perspective on different fields that I use today. Like when I'm bug fixing, I can read through code. I help out with illustrations sometimes for UI designs. I apply a lot of what I've learned throughout my journey at Blizzard.
So you mentioned bug fixing, and how you might use your previous skills. Like, what's your overall approach to bug fixing? Because that's sometimes you get games that are so hyped, maybe even from an existing franchise, existing studio, they come out and then they're just bug ridden. Even from a big studio, and they've had tens, if not maybe even 100+ million thrown at it, and it can take a game from being a 9, 10 out of 10 to being a 6 out of 10. So, what's your approach to it?
Sure. So one thing we do before we release is doing something called build reviews. So that's basically when you have a feature or some kind of project that you're going to release soon, we make sure we do like a good run through with the entire team to make sure like we we catch everything or as much as we can and try to address those before it's released. But sometimes bugs get through and we try our best. But for me, I'm usually not the one to, you know, find bugs like purposefully. I just usually, if I notice one, I might report it to my producer, or if I get one, I just do my best to like figure out where that problem is and find the solution to that, whether it is through code or whether it's through implementation. Our QA team does a fantastic job of catching as many bugs as possible, and it's very rare, when it slips through. So, um, yeah.
So you mentioned, that you've done some coding and scripting, before. Do you do any of that at, Blizzard? And, how did you find it, in general?
Yeah. Yes. So I do sometimes, bugs that I get back have to be fixed through code. It's usually like simple code changes. So our team is so great about having non-engineers be able to look at code and like if it works and it follows our, coding guidelines, then they allow me to submit some code fixes as well. So I have written code and you know we have scripting capabilities on Unity, so I'm able to write some scripts there. So yeah.
So can you talk about some of the tools, that you and software, that Blizzard, and, a big studio like that, uses?
Sure. So it is different between each game team,
Hmm.
but for us, we use Unity as a game engine, and I personally use Figma and Photoshop for my design work and mockups and any illustrations that I do. We do have some proprietary tools that I can't really talk about, but they do make our job much easier for a lot of different things on the team.
You, talking about Figma, like, there's always that thing, Figma or Adobe XD. Which one, do you prefer? What's your thoughts on that? And there were, I think, rumors that Adobe was going to acquire Figma as well. So, what's your overall views of those two pieces of software?
Sure. So I actually didn't have too much experience with Adobe XD before I joined Blizzard. I did a lot of my flows actually on Photoshop because that was the tool that I was most comfortable with. And again, I think this is really nice of Hearthstone is that they allow UI UX designers to use the tools that they need to use to produce the work that they need to produce. So some people don't even use. Some of our designers don't even use Figma. They use tools like Miro or Adobe XD, for example. So for me, I just found Figma very nice, and I've spent the most time using Figma. So that's kind of my choice of tool. Um, yeah.
Okay. So, we got a few more minutes left on the podcast. And, one thing I always love doing at the end of each episode is going through like a rapid fire, set of fun questions. Not that these questions haven't been, nice and fun as well, but they're
Sure.
usually, less businessy and more just, about, you specifically. So, are you ready for them?
Sure. Yeah, let's go for it.
So, favorite board game, video game, and movie?
Okay. Board game. Gosh, I would say. Uh, Gosh, it's been a while since I played it. I have to remember. It was like Um, gosh, I have to look it up now. It had the word Nottingham. I'm
Mm,
looking this up right now. Sheriff of Nottingham. It has a board, and it's basically this sort of like deception game where you
mhm.
pretend that you have cards and you pass it on. And I really enjoy playing that with my friends. And then, sorry, what was the other type of games?
A video game as well.
A video game right now, it's Baldur's Gate 3. I'm very into the story. It has such great just lore and narratives and design choices and character development. So, huge fan.
And favorite movie.
Favorite movie? You know what? That is a great question. I think I haven't watched many movies lately, but I do like, I think, any of the Marvel movies like Captain America, The Dark Knight. Those are all really good movies that I'm a fan of superheroes. So
Okay, I
yeah.
think so then. So you mentioned Baldur's Gate. I haven't played that game, yeah, but I've heard a lot of good things about it. People are saying it's a contender for Game of the Year. You know, what about Baldur's Gate? Do you love?
Sure. I think it's honestly the narrative. It's like one where there's so many choices where you can't get through the entire story in one go. There's so much replayability and a lot of just depth to the narrative. And I played Divinity Original Sin 2, the game by Laren Studios before Baldur's Gate 3, and I had the same experience. And that's why I was really excited for Baldur's Gate 3. Is just being able to get immersed into this world and kind of like really enjoy the story as the character that you're playing. So I think they do a really good job with that.
What video games are you looking forward to?
Ooh, yeah.
And that doesn't, necessarily because I know we're nearing the end of the year. A lot of the year's games are, have been released. Doesn't necessarily mean a game that's not out. It might just be one that you haven't bought yet or started to play yet.
Sure. Actually, no. There is an indie game called For the King 2 that recently came out earlier this month. I was a huge fan of their first one, For the King, and I played a lot of it. And I have yet to buy it, but I will soon to play it because I really enjoyed it. It's very much like D&D esque, and I love D&D. So yeah.
Okay. And what's your platform of choice? PC, mobile, console?
Yeah, I would say PC only because I actually do not own a console. Funny enough, so a lot of my games are PC and mobile, and PC. I've just grown up with PC my whole life, so yeah.
Last question before we wrap up. At Blizzard, do the team, it's a gaming company, and
Sure.
that's what they do. Do the teams ever, get together, have gaming sessions either at lunchtime or maybe on a Friday evening, and just relax, let your hair down and just go full gaming mode. And obviously on Blizzard games and other games, there's other great games from different studios.
Yeah, absolutely. So for the UI UX team specifically on Hearthstone, we have Friday social hour where we just get together and play a bunch of games together. Sometimes, usually, battlegrounds on Hearthstone. But we also play other games. We also, when we launch a new expansion, we usually take a good chunk of the day to just play our expansion and enjoy it, and just like kind of be proud of the work that we achieved, along with like if other teams released their own game, like when Diablo 4 first launched, we all took the time to just play Diablo 4 for the whole day. So
Fair
yeah.
enough. So I just want to thank you, Sola, for jumping on the podcast today. It was awesome, talking to you, hearing about Blizzard and obviously Hearthstone as well. So thank you very much.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me on your podcast. It was a great chance to talk about your great topics.
And thank you everyone else for listening. And I'll see everyone in next week's episode of FireDEV. Bye everyone.